And what stands out to me the most now is that the imposter feeling did not begin when I stepped up to present this. It began when I was first assigned this topic. It began weeks earlier when I was packing my suitcase and thinking, what am I doing? Who am I to be doing this? It began when I assumed that I would not be taken seriously. So before anyone else dismissed me, I had already dismissed myself. And that's a part that I feel like is so relevant to what we do as teachers. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Scrappy Piano Teacher Podcast. My name is Jacqueline Rosick, but you can call me Jackie. And if you're new here, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. This podcast is for teachers who are wanting to build a sustainable studio and, have some teacher talk every now and then. And that is what I'm here for. Now, this episode has been on my list for a while, pretty much ever since I started the podcast. And I don't know why I've never done one, but lately it feels especially timely. So I thought, we got to do this, Jackie. This has got to happen. And I don't know if it's that time of year. It's February as I'm recording this. So again, I don't know if it's mid-year fatigue or just the amount of comparison that we're all absorbing right now, but imposter syndrome feels so loud in our industry. I've heard it in conversations. I've seen it online. I've felt it myself. It's just like loud in your face. Side note, I do have a bit of a cold. So yeah, I probably sound a little stuffed up. And if you hear any weird edits, it's probably because I had to take a break to blow my nose. So anyway, just want to get that out of the way right now. Back to what I'm talking about, imposter syndrome. Okay, so another thing that I have noticed that is interesting is that imposter syndrome happens a lot immediately after a moment of growth. All right, so hear me out. You restructure your policies. Maybe your onboarding process. Maybe you've raised tuition for the first time in years, and that is scary. Or maybe you're setting some boundaries and you're finally saying no to something that is draining you, and you know that you're making the right call. And everything's done very thoughtfully, very professionally, confidently. You've talked to some other teachers about it. You've got the information. You're good to go. And everybody responds fine. Like they might even respond positively and everything goes smoothly. But then there's that one parent that disagrees or makes a comment, and suddenly you spiral. You're thinking, was that too much? Did I overstep? Like, who do I think I am? Maybe I'm not cut out to run a business like this. I'm not a real business owner. That is the moment that I'm talking about, because the moment is rarely about the policy. It's about the narrative. Now, before I connect this to your studio, let me go briefly back in time. Back in time to when Jackie was in her early 20s, 22 to be exact, 20 years ago. But who's doing the math? Anyway, I was hired to work in a corporate office. I was by far the youngest person there. Most of the people in the office had been together, working together for 15 years or more. And so here I was, this brand new young single mom, which all you other single mamas out there, especially if you're on the younger side, you already know the preconceived ideas that people have about you, right? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I also had never worked in a corporate office before. And on top of that, I have always looked younger than I am. So when I was 22, I probably looked like I was 15 years old. That does not help my case at all as you are setting foot into a situation like that. It definitely did not help me feel like I belonged. I can tell you that right now. And I made a lot of mistakes at the beginning because I was brand new. And so I asked for help constantly because I was terrified of making mistakes. But I can actually see how in hindsight, that would make me look even less competent than I was, because my insecurity was not just showing, it was like screaming, hey, look at me. I don't know what I'm doing. And yeah, when you start at the bottom of the totem pole, that early impression can linger a lot longer than you expect it to. So there I am, I'm working. And about 3 years later, I am invited to present at a company event in Atlanta. Our company had offices all over the world. And this was, I wouldn't call it a conference, but there was several offices from around the country that were meeting at the time. So there were over 200 corporate professionals in that room. And my boss, who was based in Chicago, believed in investing in younger employees who were driven and wanted to grow. And fortunately for me, he saw something in me and asked me to present as part of a committee focused on customer service within the company. So my specific topic, I don't remember what it was, but I know that it had to do with email etiquette, because when you have offices across time zones and countries, communication really matters. And that was the situation that we were in. Not only that, but this was the early to mid 2000s. And so email was still, it wasn't new, but people didn't really know how to effectively communicate with one another. And that was an issue. So that's what we were dealing with. So while I was presenting, I wasn't just a little nervous. Okay. I was crazy nervous. I'm standing there in that room, and all I could think of was that this topic was ridiculous. I remember thinking that these people probably already knew how to write emails. They probably didn't even want to be sitting there, which I promise you that was most likely the case. They had real work to do, and this most likely felt like fluff to them. And who was I, at 25 years old, to stand up there and tell them how to communicate professionally? So yeah, I was nervous. I remember my voice was shaking. I remember my arms were shaking. The whole thing was like an out of body experience. But there was one part that I remember so clearly, and that is looking over to a coworker who had traveled with me. And I could tell that he was silently cheering me on, because it was pretty obvious that I was petrified at what was happening. And I could also see this sympathy, like, oh, Jackie. I could just see it on his face. Some things we will never forget, right? And yeah, that's how I remembered it for a really long time. And this was a moment where I perceived as crashing and burning. But when I look on it now, with a little bit more distance and a little bit more objectivity, and as someone who's a little older, a little wiser, I definitely see something different, because I was prepared for that presentation. I knew my material. I was nervous, yeah, but I got through it. I didn't forget anything. I didn't get pulled off the stage. No one stood up and said I didn't belong there. The story I told myself afterward was far more harsh than the actual reality. And what stands out to me the most now is that the imposter feeling did not begin when I stepped up to present this. It began when I was first assigned this topic. It began weeks earlier, when I was building the slides, when I'm questioning whether the topic was valuable, when I was packing my suitcase and thinking, what am I doing? Who am I to be doing this? It began when I assumed that I would not be taken seriously. So before anyone else dismissed me, I had already dismissed myself. And that's a part that I feel like is so relevant to what we do as teachers. So when I started researching imposter syndrome more intentionally, I went down quite a rabbit hole, you guys. There is quite a rabbit hole that you can go down. So I'm going to ask you to travel with me a little bit in my big old hole full of rabbits. Okay. As I was reading, I was really struck by something important. So the term imposter syndrome, I think for me, I have thought of it as something newer, maybe within the past decade or two, because of social media. That is not true. The term imposter phenomenon was identified back in 1978 by two psychologists, Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes. And a few years later, Pauline Clance developed a 20-item scale of questions that is still used in research today. Think of it as one of those quizzes, right? And what that scale measures is not actual incompetence. It's not even mentioned of competence or not, okay? It actually measures interpretation patterns. So things like difficulty internalizing success, attributing achievement to luck. Have you ever done that before? Like, anybody would have done that. I was just lucky. That, the fear of being exposed, maybe exposed as a fraud, like you don't actually know as much as people think that you know. And that's really important because most teachers I know are not incompetent by any stretch of the imagination. They are tired, they are high achieving people, and they're constantly evaluating themselves, and they care. They care deeply. Another study that I found was a 2019 systematic review that found consistent links between imposter feelings and dun, 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 burnout. We are always talking about burnout. Sometimes that word just annoys me because it comes up so much, but here we are. So, burnout includes emotional exhaustion, and it also includes something called a reduced sense of accomplishment. And when you are exhausted, your brain does not evaluate your wins accurately. It's going to minimize them, it's going to magnify the criticism. And so let's bring this back to your studio. Let's say you finally raise your rates after 5 years of undercharging. You send the email, it's clear, it's professional. You explain your reasoning, parents respond respectfully, and you're like, oh, good. And then again, that one parent replies with hesitation or pushback. And instead of seeing that as one data point in a larger picture, your brain decides it's evidence. It is evidence that you move too fast, that you're wrong, that you're not experienced enough, that you're overstepping, and that you don't belong in this role. But think about the facts. You prepared it thoughtfully. Most of the families agreed. Your studio continues functioning. Students are progressing, aren't they? You provide real value to your community and to the studio that you have built. You are solving real problems. The reaction of one person does not erase the reality of your competence. Another example, you try something new in a group class. It's creative, it works, the kids are engaged. Later that night, you see another teacher post a beautifully edited video of a group class that looks more polished than yours and so much more creative. And it's got like 100 likes and everybody's commenting on how awesome they are, which maybe it is awesome. So kudos to them, right? And instead of thinking that's great for them, your brain shifts immediately into comparison mode that you're behind, you're not creative enough, your studio isn't that special, you're not as good of a teacher as them. And again, that interpretation is not proof, it's just pattern. There's a difference between recognizing growth areas and questioning your entire legitimacy in what you're doing. If you realize that your technique while you're playing needs refining, well, that's actionable, right? You can take lessons, you can practice differently, you can do some research, talk to some colleagues, send them a recording, ask them what they think. Growth is part of being professional. If you realize that your policies were maybe a little unclear, you can revise them, So, okay, why is this parent upset? Is this something that I can control? Is this something that they're just dealing with on their own? Did I not communicate this clearly? Like, is there something I can change about that? And if there is, then whatever, you tweak it, you say, here, sorry about that, and you move on, and that is just simply developing. But sometimes it's just going to happen. Every time you make changes or every time you set boundaries, you're going to get some pushback. You're going to get questioned. And when you get questioned, you're going to question yourself. So when your brain jumps from I can improve to I shouldn't be doing this at all, we're getting away from the humility part of maybe needing to learn a little bit more. And we're getting into the identity level doubt. And identity level doubt often shows up when we're tired, when we're burnout. We work in evaluative environments. We were trained in them. As musicians, critique is normal. Refinement is expected and perfectionism is reinforced. And then you add in being a high achiever, a perfectionist, social media, our incredibly overscheduled lives, our students' incredibly overscheduled lives, emotional labor with students and parents, and the fact that many of us run solo businesses with no formal feedback structures. And sometimes working at home is just lonely. I mean, of course, imposter syndrome is going to be loud and in your face. So instead of asking, how do I eliminate the self-doubt? I think a better question is, what is this telling me? Like, what is happening right now? Is it telling me that I need more skill in a specific area? Okay, great. That's solvable if it is, but is it also maybe instead telling me that I'm exhausted? Well, okay, that's solvable in a different way. Or is it telling me that I'm comparing without context? I'll tell you what it's not telling you. It is not automatically telling you that you don't belong in this profession. And this is where I want to kind of come back to some facts here. When imposter syndrome hits, You really got to ground yourself in something measurable. So we can think about it this way. Are students enrolling? Are they progressing? Are families returning year after year? Have I grown compared to where I was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Those things are going to matter more than the volume of one parent's discomfort or one colleague's highlight reel with all the colors, So when we grow, we might be growing publicly. Our studio families might see it happening, or maybe even on social media, but you're allowed to grow publicly. You're allowed to adjust your studio model, refine your own playing, ask for mentorship, ask for help in running your studio and your systems and your business, and just to say that I'm still figuring this out, because growing does not equal being a fraud. So if imposter syndrome has been really loud for you lately, especially after you've made a change or taken a risk or put something out there, like something that you have worked so passionately on and you've put it out there, pause before you let that voice define anything and ask yourself what narrative you're listening to. Is this factual? Is it humility? Is it growth? Or is it comparison? Is it exhaustion? And then decide your next step from clarity instead of from fear. Teaching is a long game. Studios evolve. We evolve. And the fact that you're thinking critically about your work is not a sign that you don't belong. It's a sign that you care. And so if you are feeling this imposter syndrome, why? What is the real trigger here? Is it the post that somebody else made that shows them being successful? Or is it because you are feeling resentment that you're not getting paid enough, or that you are overwhelmed, or that your work's not being taken seriously? Ask yourself, is there objective evidence to show that I am incompetent right now? Is there objective evidence that I am capable or incapable? If this were luck, how many times has this luck happened consistently? What did I actually do that contributed to success or no success? And then there's questions around fear. What am I afraid someone will discover? If they did discover that, what would happen? Realistically, what would happen? Or has anyone actually questioned my competence, or am I just assuming they are? Are you making up conversations in your head? There are so many different questions that could go with this. And I think that one of the most effective questions that we can ask ourselves is, what would I say about this to one of my own students? And that right there can really solve a lot of problems, because we know how to talk to our students. We know how to help our students. So if you were going to flip the script in that sense, what would you say? Alrighty, friends, that went on a little bit longer than I had intended. Sorry about that. I told you it was a rabbit hole. But if this episode resonated with you whatsoever, would you do me such a big favor and leave a 5-star rating or review on whatever platform you are listening or watching this on? And make sure that you're subscribed too, so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. Those little things actually make a really big difference in helping this podcast reach more teachers, and it helps me out as well. And if you're not on my email list yet, that is where I like to share the extras. Every now and then, I like to host free teacher meetups, like the recent recital conversation that I just had with Jana Williamson. It was phenomenal. She is just fantastic. Thank you, Jana, for everything that you contributed to us last week. It was just so good. We had great discussion, and there were a few freebies and discounts that went along with it. And I don't always blast those everywhere. I try to, but I can only do so much. So if you want access to those kinds of things, make sure you're on the list. And as we wrap up, I just want to leave you with this. If imposter syndrome has been loud for you lately, pause before you let it define anything. Ask yourself what story you're listening to. Ask whether it's factual, whether it's humility, whether it's growth, or whether you're just in a season where you're tired or overstimulated or comparing without context. Comparison is a thief. It is what it is. We all do it. If you figure out how to stop doing it, let me know, because I would love to know. There is a difference between recognizing room to grow and deciding that you don't belong. You're allowed to keep becoming better at what you do. That doesn't disqualify you. It just means that you care. And again, I just think you guys are great. It drives me nuts when I see people who are amazing and competent, and I see all that they're contributing to within our industry question themselves, and I just don't want you to either. So anyway, that's all I've got for you guys. So take care of yourselves. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.